Welcome back, everyone. This is your friend, Dr. James. We are diving straight back into our deep study on the sovereignty of God. This is part 2 of our series. Before we begin, I want to give credit where credit is due. The core of today's discussion comes directly from the extensive research and lectures of Dr. Ken Wilson. We are indebted to his scholarship for uncovering these historical shifts. And if you hear me use an illustration today, specifically the chess master analogy later on, please know that belongs to Dr. Wilson. So grab your coffee, open your minds, and let's get into the heavy lifting. The Stoic infection of sovereignty. Last time, we started to peel back the layers on Augustine. We saw that Augustine's view of God wasn't derived purely from the apostolic tradition. It was heavily influenced by a Stoic view of God. It was, frankly, a pagan view of God. Now, why does that matter? Because Augustine brought this view into Christianity, and centuries later, Calvin picked it up. So what we often call the Calvinist view today is really, at its root, a Stoic view of God. You have to understand that prior to Augustine, Christians held a relational view of God. They believed God determined things based on his foreknowledge of the relationship he had with people. They held this view specifically against the Stoic view of pagan determinism. The early church believed that free will didn't threaten God's sovereignty. They believed free will enhanced it. But thanks to Augustine, the word sovereignty, as it is used by most people in Christianity today, has morphed. It came to mean a manipulative, dictatorial micromanagement. It became a unilateral, non-relational control of every single act in the universe. Think about the implications of that. If God micromanages everything, then every evil, every wrong, every horrendous tragedy was done by God's sovereign decree. That means he chose it. It was his plan, his purpose, his desire. When you take that Stoic definitions and drop it into Christianity, you have a massive problem. You make God the author of evil. Augustine essentially altered the regula fidei, the rule of faith handed down by the apostles. While the early fathers taught freedom of choice to combat pagan fatalism, Augustine Christianized fatalism. He baptized it and brought it into the mainstream. And since about 400 AD, not a single theologian in 1,600 years has been able to solve the problem of God causing evil under that system. We've looked at Arthur Pink. We've looked at the authors of Why I'm Not an Arminian. What is their answer to the dilemma that God decrees evil but somehow isn't culpable for it? Their answer is an appeal to the secret counsel of God. Basically, we have no clue. Mystery versus contradiction, nobody has solved it. And right there, that should be a red flag. We should stop and say, maybe there is a problem with our premise. Maybe we've misunderstood what Scripture is saying. People often try to label this an antinomy. You know what an antinomy is? It's something that appears to be contradictory but really isn't. But mystery and antinomy are the wrong words here. It's actually a contradiction. When we claim secret counsel to cover up a logical impossibility, we are ignoring that we have likely misunderstood the definition of sovereignty itself. Augustine before the shift. It is fascinating to look at Augustine before he transferred into this deterministic view. In his early days, even though he had a Stoic background, he adopted the universal Christian view of his time. He believed that even though God was sovereign, he gave free choice to humans. Here is what Augustine wrote in The City of God, back when he held the traditional view that foreknowledge is the key. He argued that God doesn't just unilaterally choose, he foreknows. He knows, okay, Joe is going to do this, Sally is going to do this, and based on that foreknowledge, God decides what he will do. Augustine wrote, therefore, we are by no means compelled, either retaining the prescience of God to take away the freedom of the will, or retaining the freedom of the will, deny that he is prescient of future things. He says we embrace both. He says prayers work because God foreknew he would grant them to those who asked. And punishments are just because, as Augustine said, a man does not therefore sin because God foreknew that he would sin. This is the golden key. Foreknowledge is not causative. If you understand that, you have the answer. That is what the early Christians taught. The problem only started when Augustine abandoned this for Stoic determinism. Compatibilism and the definition of sovereignty. In modern theology, we talk about compatibilism. This is the attempt to answer the question, if we have God's sovereignty, His control over here, and human freedom over there, how do we make them compatible? This has been a headache for 1,600 years, but notice this. No Christian prior to Augustine had to deal with compatibilism. Why? Because for them, there wasn't a problem. They had a different definition of sovereignty. We need to distinguish between two types of sovereignty. One, specific sovereignty. This is the Stoic view. Every minute detail, every atom, every thought is decreed and controlled by God. Two, general sovereignty. This was the early Christian view. God is sovereign over the kingdom, but He doesn't dictate every tiny detail. Think of a king. He is sovereign over his nation, but he doesn't tell the wife how much sugar to put in her cake. He doesn't tell the iron worker exactly how much heat to apply to his torch. He is generally sovereign without being a dictatorial micromanager. The chess master analogy, Dr. Ken Wilson. Now this leads us to a brilliant insight from Irenaeus, who wrote around 180 AD. He believed that free will actually magnifies God's sovereignty. Irenaeus argued that if you diminish man's freedom, you automatically diminish God's omnipotence. That sounds counterintuitive to the Calvinist mind, doesn't it? But let's use Dr. Ken Wilson's illustration of the chess master. Imagine a chess master playing against a 4-year-old child. Scenario A, the chess master forces the child's hand. He picks up the child's hand, moves the piece to a specific spot, and then plays his own move. He controls both sides of the board. When the master wins, you'd say, well, of course he won. He controlled everything. That didn't take much skill. Scenario B, the chess master tells the child, put your pieces wherever you want. The child might not even know the rules. They might make crazy moves. And yet, the chess master is so skilled, so powerful, that no matter what the child does freely, the master still wins. That is power. That is a big God. The Stoics, the Gnostics, and the Manichaeans, they believed in a God who had to plan and force every detail to get his way. That is a puny God. But a God who allows total freedom and still accomplishes his decreed purposes, that is a powerful God. So, if we define sovereignty biblically as general sovereignty, both sovereignty and free will are true. We don't have a problem. Sovereignty determines soteriology. Finally, we have to look at how your view of sovereignty dictates your view of soteriology, salvation. If you hold the Calvinist view, you look at Romans 9. Jacob have I loved, Esau have I hated. And you conclude that God is the one who determines everything. You conclude that God is free to show mercy to whom He wills, and human will is irrelevant. They will tell you it's not arbitrary, it just transcends our reason. Let me translate that for you again. We have no clue because we do have reason. We are made in the image of God. We intuitively know there is a problem here. Imagine a house is burning. There are 5 people trapped inside. I have a fireproof suit. I have the ability to run in and save all 5 of them without getting hurt. If I run in and save all 5, you'd say, that's what he's supposed to do. But what if I say, you know what? I'm only going to save 3 of them. The other 2, I'm going to let them burn. You would think I was a monster. And if I told you, oh, my reasons just transcend your understanding, that wouldn't help you. You would still know something is wrong. That is what we should think of the Stoic view of God. It doesn't transcend reason. It contradicts the character of God found in Scripture. Conclusion. If God is a micromanager who determines every act, then our eternal destinies are fated. We are trapped. But if we look at the general sovereignty of the early church, we see a God who is powerful enough to grant freedom and still be king. We have seen that the Stoic view creates a theological mess. We have seen that the early church had a solution in foreknowledge and general sovereignty. And we have seen that a God who wins a chess match against a free opponent is infinitely greater than one who plays both sides of the board. In our next session, we are going to continue this thread. We will look deeper into understanding the will of God and how we can make sense of this mess to arrive at a truly biblical view of justification. Thanks for listening.